work on modeling mechanical motion. And so we're going to create an assembly like you see here of these parts. And just to show you kind of the end process here, we're going to be able to animate that motion and create the exact motion to replicate how these parts would interact and work in a real scenario. And so we'll work on that, creating that mechanical motion within Onshape here today. So the first step is to go ahead and create a new assembly file. Within that assembly, we're going to insert the standard parts we need. We need a 1x8 beam. We just need one of those, so I'll go ahead and place that. We need two 2-inch shafts, and so I'll place 2 of those shafts. We need a 10mm pulley, and we need a 40mm pulley. And so once I have that created, we can kind of get an idea about how these parts are going to interact together. If you look, notice the pulleys have a square shaft or a hole in the middle, and the shafts are square. And so these things are going to rotate together. When the shaft turns, the pulley is going to turn. And so the constraint that we need to be able to replicate that is a fasten mate. So I'll go ahead and click fasten. And then on my axle shaft, I'll zoom in here until I get the circle highlighted. And I can go ahead and click that. And then I'll come over here to my pulley, get the circle highlighted, and put that in there like that. I'll go ahead and offset it. So I'll offset it on the shaft. Let's offset it a 1/2 inch and see what happens. It's exactly what we want. So we'll offset that a 1/2 inch. I can go ahead and click the green check mark. We'll do the exact same thing for the other shaft and pulley. So again, I'll use a fasten constraint. Select the end of my shaft. Come over here to my pulley. Make sure I get the geometry I want. I want the outside circle right there. And then I can offset that in the Z a 1/2 inch. That's exactly how we want it. I'll go ahead and click the green check mark. Oh, if you look at this, you can see that the shaft is not oriented correctly. And so let's go ahead and fix that really quickly. On that constraint, I'm going to right click and say edit. And then let's just rotate that 45 degrees. And we're going to want to do that in the Z axis. So when I do that in the Z axis, it's going to rotate that shaft and make it line up in the square hole just like we want it. All right, and so that will take kind of care of our 2 pulley and shafts. Now we're going to insert those into our 1x8 bar. The first thing I'm going to do to that bar is I'm going to go ahead and fix it so it has 0 degrees of freedom, so it can't move, so the axle and the pulleys will move to that bar. All right. When I have that done, these axles will actually spin within these holes, and so the mate that will allow us to do that is a revolute. So I'll go ahead and click my revolute mate. I'll come over here to the other end of my shaft, select the end. Then I'm going to put that into the second hole. Looks like I didn't have it selected like I thought. Let's try again. There we go. Into the second hole like we want it there, and I'm going to offset that in the Z direction 1 inch, just so that axle is in the middle of the 1x8 bar. I'll click the green check mark and make my model come back. Do the same thing for the other one, revolute mate. Select the end, the shaft. Again, I'll put it in the second hole from the end here. Select that. Let's offset it again in the Z 1 inch. The green check mark. And we now have both of our pulleys constrained to that 1x8 bar. We can see that the motion works the way we want it. They both spin. We can even come in and edit those, or excuse me, we can animate those revolute mates so that they'll spin just like that. The problem is we want these to interact with each other, all right? And so we want both of these revolute mates to interact like they would in real life. So for the simplicity of this design, we didn't include the belt that would drive this pulley system in Onshape, but in real life we still want it to behave like it would in real life. So we want it to behave like it in the model like it would in real life. And so to do that, we're going to come up here and we're going to use a gear relation. All right. And so this is going to allow us to create some motion. So I click gear relation. I'm going to select our first revolute and our second revolute. And what this is doing is it's giving us some parameters to define how these things work together. All right. And so if I just go ahead and click the green check mark, I can come in here to my revolute now, my revolute mate 1, and I can animate that and I can see what happens. So if we look at what's happening here, this pulley is turning this way, this pulley is turning in the opposite direction. And so that's not how this would behave if there was a belt driving these two pulleys. They would be moving in the same direction. And so that's something that we're going to have to edit. So again, I'll go into the gear 1, I'll click edit, and I'll select reverse direction. And now when I animate that revolute, you can see that our pulleys are going in the same direction now. One more thing we kind of need to fix with that is if you notice when I spin this pulley one time, the larger pulley also turns one time. All right, and so that's not how these pulleys would behave in a real environment. And so we need to fix that. And so under my gear 1, I'll come in here and click edit, and I can see this relation ratio. And so with that, every time this is a 40 millimeter gear and this is a 10 millimeter gear. And so that tells us that every time that this 40 millimeter pulley spins one time, this 10 millimeter pulley is going to spin 4 times. And so that's the ratio between the two pulleys. So 40 to 10 or 4 to 1. All right, and so if I change this relation ratio to 4, let's see what happens. Hit the green check mark, come into Revolute and click Animate. I can see how this pulley is spinning 4 times and this pulley is spinning 1 time. And so we have that backwards, right? And so we can come into our gear relationship again, click Edit, and instead of putting a 4 in here, I put a 0.25. So this is going to go a quarter turn when this goes 1 turn. And so it's the same relationship kind of flipped the other way. Right click, animate, and now I can see that the pulleys are behaving like they should. So this pulley is turning 1 time, and this pulley is turning a quarter of a time. Or if this pulley goes around an entire time, this pulley is turning 4 times. I could change the start and end values, the steps in between. And then instead of reciprocate, I can say I just want it to loop over and over again so it doesn't go back to the original. And you can see that, again, when this pulley spins 1 time around, this pulley has completed 4 revolutions. And so that's how you create the mechanical motion for this pulley and belt system.